We've arrived at Act 4. Act 4, accentuate the negatives. Since we have the luxury of showing you pictures today, we wanted to tell a story that would really fully use that power. And part of this story is famous in photography circles. A guy who didn't know much about photography. He was a 27-year-old real estate agent named John Maloof, bought himself a box of negatives at a Chicago auction house, kind of on a whim. And they were all made by one photographer, it turns out. He was looking through them. It was a complete unknown. And it was one of these things where the photographer had them in these, those rental storage lockers, along with like huge stacks of old newspapers, and a lot of junk actually was in these lockers. And for whatever reason, the photographer stopped making payments on the lockers, and everything went up for auction.
I paid $400 for the box. I got about 30 to 40,000 negatives.
So that's John Maloof. He started to go through these pictures, and he expected like a couple of good shots. His expectations were pretty low. And he's scanning them into the computer, and they kind of blew him away. He posted on a street photography forum on Flickr, "Is this good? Like, do bodies of work often come up like this?" And the answer was like, "This never, ever happens." One picture after another like this.
It was like, it was like a compulsion for me. Because I wondered what the next one's gonna be. Like, I would not go to the bathroom, just like constant scanning. What I liked about it is seeing that other world. You could see every little like fiber on their clothes. It was really cool.
This photographer, her name was Vivian Maier, is now talked about as one of the great street photographers who's ever taken pictures. At her height of productivity, which was, she started taking pictures in '49, and the greatest period went through the mid-'70s. She had periods of shooting a roll to 3 rolls of film every single day. It's over 110,000 negatives in all. She seems to have no living family. And before all this, before these photographs were discovered in these storage lockers, nobody had heard of her, apparently. Like, she was completely unknown. She was completely invisible to the world. She made her living as a nanny, taking care of kids in the Chicago suburbs, wandering around the city, taking pictures on her days off. This is her. She's in a lot of the pictures. She died just days before John set out in earnest to find her. And this lady pretty much took over John's life, I think it's fair to say, for several years, between scanning through thousands and thousands of photographs and sorting through the photos and publishing a book of the photos, which many of these are from that book, and tracking down people who knew her. He's now spoken with 70 people who had met her and interviewed them, 35 of them, for a documentary that he's making right now, as he's trying to figure out what she was all about, like what this was all about. Why did she take these pictures? And the biggest mystery of all, why did she never show them to anyone?
She wanted to keep the pictures to herself. I don't know why. I really don't know why.
That's Inger Raymond. Vivian Maier was her nanny from the age of 5 to the age of 7. So Inger spent every day with her for years and knew her very well, but still, she never entered Miss Maier's room in the house.
Well, she kept a padlock on it, so she was an unusual person. She kept a padlock on it, but every now and then I'd sneak behind her and look.
And what would she have done if you had tried to go into that room with her?
She would have been very, very upset.
She's very private.
Exceedingly private. She's, anything about her private life was hers. You don't intrude on that.
Among the things in that room, she said, there were these huge, huge stacks of newspapers. So many, Inger says, that the floor started to sag in their house, and her dad had to put steel jacks to support it. Inger, her description of Vivian Maier matches what dozens of people have told John Maloof in interviews. Vivian Maier was blunt, she was outspoken. There were clerks in camera stores who say today that they would hide in the back when she came in. She was so brusque. She was full of opinions about movies and politics. She spoke with a French accent, walked with purpose, wore sturdy, unfashionable clothes, seemed to have no close friends at all. No boyfriends, no girlfriends, never talked about family or her past. dozens of photos, or maybe hundreds, in the collection are of Inger, and they're beautiful. One of the odd things about doing this story was when I showed them to Inger, she had never seen any of these pictures. It was like handing her all these moments from her past that she didn't even know existed. Some other kids that Vivian Maier took care of, especially some of the older ones, didn't like her as a nanny. She could be harsh. She could be mean. She was weird, right? She's weird. She's always carrying around the camera everywhere, always taking the kids to weird places, or that's ones who didn't like her said. But Inger saw these trips totally as adventures. They would get on the L, and if she would ask where they were going, Miss Maier would say, "It's a secret."
So you saw her take a lot of pictures. Her portraits are so amazing. Do you remember seeing her photograph strangers on the street?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I do remember that.
And would she do it very quickly before they could object? Would she ask their permission? Like, what was the process?
It usually, almost always, I mean, like I said, sometimes we just talking with them and then she'd take a picture. Usually it was just point and shoot.
It's funny, it's easy seeing these pictures to imagine that she's this solitary figure wandering around, kind of a sad figure, a loner, an outsider, looking in on other people who are really having real, full lives. And I'm wondering, is that picture of her accurate?
No, I think she actually chose to live the way she chose to live. I don't think that she's this, desperate, lonely person. That she was absolutely, this is what she chose to do. This is the way she chose to live her life.
And why shoot tens of thousands of photos and never show them to anybody? Inger says she figures it's like a diary. She's shooting whatever seemed interesting every single day. But John Maloof, who found the photos and also has Vivian Maier's books and some of her clothes and some of her cameras, he points out that Vivian Maier was a hoarder. She kept all those newspapers as she got older. She kept a lot of other stuff too.
Rubber bands to bottle caps, everything. But with her photography, I think that she would take pictures of things almost like in a hoarding compulsion.
But what is she hoarding in that case? It's like you're saying she's
hoarding memories. That's the way I think of it.
There are these two guys, Cahan and Mike Williams, who have immersed themselves in Maier's work for the last year, poring over thousands and thousands of photographs for a book of her work, that they're putting out in September. And they say that the sheer volume of this work, the fact that she was documenting her life every single day, means that unlike other photographers, the best way to understand her work is not to do what you do with other photographers, to pick out, one great picture or 10 great pictures. Here's Mike Williams.
With Vivian Maier's work, you have to fight that urge. And I think that it all takes on much greater meaning when you see it in sequence. Not just one particular roll, but 10 rolls, or 100 rolls, or a year's worth of rolls.
So take contact sheet number 526. This was shot on June 19th, 1968. By the way, these and a lot of the pictures I'm showing you today are from a collection of photos owned by Jeffrey Goldstein.
The first two are Inger in front of her house. And then the one that follows that is Inger pointing out a scrape that she's gotten on her leg. And then you can see that they're moving. They go by a movie theater where she's taking a picture of people waiting in line. And then there's a boy here who's shining shoes. And then she's moving on, and then Inger's taking a little break here, sitting on the ground. And then Inger is talking to two people in front of a store. You really get this sense of a day is going by here. You're going for a walk, you're going shopping.
They chose sequences of photos for their book to recreate that sense in their book that you get when you just flip through the pictures. On a roll of film, a contact sheet from April 1968, there's a couple pictures of Inger on the monkey bars, and then you have this random kid.
And then, interestingly, the next two images are of her 1967 taxes, which she had a habit of doing. She would record on film pictures of canceled checks, notes, passports, pictures of Valentines that the kids gave her. She would arrange all the Valentines on the table.
Here's another set of shots from just one roll of film, one contact sheet, taken one day in 1969. This last shot of Vivian Maier was probably taken by Inger. Inger says that sometimes they would pass the camera back and forth. Inger says it always gave her anxiety because Miss Maier was such a stickler for focus being correct. Vivian Maier would also shoot things that seem intended to just capture the times. There's lots and lots of newspaper headlines. That's from '68 from the riots. This is Lyndon Johnson campaigning on November 1st, 1960. That's Gloria Swanson at a Chicago Film Festival in 1965. And then this is the '68 riots. The West Side was burned down in Chicago. She took a bus and just rode around taking pictures. Bobby Kennedy was killed. The demonstrations in front of the Chicago Democratic National Convention, the demonstrators there. And so what would you think of us, people like us, seeing these photos together right now? You know, what would you think of us together today, looking at these pictures?
She would have hated all this. It would never have happened if she was living, trust me.
This is Carol Pone, who I reached on the telephone. One of her sons was friendly when he was growing up with a kid that Vivian Maier took care of. And so she saw Vivian Maier all the time. She'd drop by, they would watch the kids together and talk about films and art. Never anything personal, she says. And Vivian Maier actually took pictures of her kids, of Carol's kids, and gave them to Carol, you know, just as a present, but Carol never had any idea what else Vivian was doing with her photography.
She's a very private, buttoned-up person. She would have hated this. She just wanted to take pictures.
She wouldn't be proud of how good they are?
No, she never would have let this happen. That's what I'm saying to you. Because she wasn't interested in showing them to any other people.
I ran this idea by John Maloof, who's the one who actually really exposed her pictures to the world. Like I said, he's talked to dozens of people who knew her.
Given how private she was with these pictures, what would she think of you showing them to the world?
I don't know. But that her life story being out there in the world is something she definitely would not like.
Oh, like story, private
Like
information
this.
about her. Like this
Yeah.
conversation you're having now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wouldn't want that.
No.
Us
I
trying-
could say that with confidence. She would not like that.
Of course, there's a real question, does it matter what she wanted? Like, does it entirely matter what she wanted? Rich Cahan is co-authoring that new book about Vivian Maier, and he says that she reminds him a lot of Emily Dickinson, who, you know, you may know, she lived like a hermit, she was a shut-in. Her work, it was a trove of 1,800 poems, didn't come to light until after she died. Her sister published the poems.
So I guess the sister was did a good thing in my mind.
It's funny how the living always kick the asses of the dead.
Yeah.
Misunderstand them, say exactly the opposite things about them than they once said.
Yeah. No, it reminds me of funerals. Like, for years, my wife wanted to be cremated. And frankly, the idea of burning my wife's body is not something that really appeals to me. So I say to myself, okay, fine. I'll just say, sure, I hear you. Am I going to cremate her? No, don't tell her this. But, you know, what's important is what goes beyond. The living are the important, not the dead.
You know, I'm filming this, right?
That's okay. That's okay.
Whether she wanted us to see these photos or not, you know, these are moments that she just decided she was going to save, you know? Like this day right here from the late 1960s. Nothing important is happening on this day. It's just stuff that she stared at for an instant and froze on film. Look at that. A half century later, we see these moments probably exactly the same way that she saw them, just like frozen in time there. And I think we feel an appreciation for them that she never, ever would have wanted us to feel.